have this gift of generating great ideas that we get super excited about. And Jack talked about how when he was drawing and sketching, and suddenly he became so excited about this that he even considered, and they'd made the decision to change the whole course of their company. Some of us come up with ideas and we decide to change careers. And when we come up with these ideas, we fall in love with them. We fall in love with them because they're shiny and fun and new, and we obsess over them, so much so that we can start taking rapid action, which is great. Unfortunately, we're not monogamous. So here's a concept I would present to you, is that you have this brand new idea that you're super excited about. Energy, excitement is extremely, extremely high. And this is the moment when you're willing to sheer perspiration, stay up all night, write massive amounts of emails, action steps, having meetings, really, really stressing, doing everything you can possibly do to make this idea happen. And then you start to assemble people to work with you, and you start to kind of go on, and more meetings, and more action, and more talking, and long, long days. And then, of course, energy and excitement starts to go down. And you enter kind of the doldrums of project management, or what I've come to call the project plateau. And it is here where most ideas are abandoned. In fact, the project plateau is probably littered with the carcasses of dead ideas that have never happened. And now, what do? We're in this doldrum, when we're in this depression, well, you know what we do? We tap into our gift. We return to that love of sex appeal. We just generate a new idea. We do it again and again and again. What we continue to do is we escape this project plateau with a new idea. And instantaneously, we return to this high of excitement, this high of willingness to execute. And this is why there are more half-written novels in the world than there are novels. This is why so many ideas die. And so the question is, how can we survive the project plateau? And you've heard things from a lot of the speakers so far today about best practices in staying engaged in some sort of long-term and bold pursuit. Ultimately, when we start to make progress, when we start to get feedback, when we start to generate revenues, we start to see this light at the end of the tunnel, and the project plateau becomes a little bit more easy to withstand. But the question is, how do we survive this period where there's none of that? I'd like to introduce another concept, which is the Creatives Comprise. And when I went out to interview as many of the most creative and productive people and teams in the world, I really thought that these people were really true to their creative essence, and I was so curious, like, how do these people make ideas happen again and again, whereas most people can't? And I was interested to find that a lot of these people consider that they claim that they've made, in some ways, a compromise of an aspect of their very essence. This idea-to-idea syndrome, they've actually taken on some unnatural restraints or constraints to their creative process. They've actually started to discipline themselves against what is naturally their essence, which is to, again, love ideas and continue to generate them. So let's talk about some of the tips and things that I've seen. I mean, first of all, you want this project plateau to be as short as possible. I mean, obviously. And so seeking restraints is a huge part of that. And when I asked some teams, tell me about a nightmare project. Tell me about where things just went really off and a new idea got you off track. I mean, what's the story behind that? A lot of them would claim that it was when they got their dream brief, which was no budget, no timeline, no deadlines. A client came to them and said, just think big, think massive. And that's really where they get off track. So the tip here is to make sure that when you don't have restraints in your project, in this bold project you're being given or you're taking on your own, to seek them. And when you are given restraints, to value them rather than defy them, which is what sometimes our tendency is. So how about these big, massive projects? Leslie talked about thinking big but acting small. And I really agree, and what I've seen is that a lot of the most productive creative teams really take this to heart. They take these big, big chunks and they break them down into increments. Now, increments are really just arbitrary amounts of time. They're not about goals, they're about time. What am I going to be doing? Or how much time am I going to spend on this project? 4 months, 2 weeks, whatever it is. And then defining these increments in your mind. And even cutting increments into smaller increments. And then once you have increments defined, then going further and breaking them down into milestones. What am I hoping to reach during these increments? What are the measurable milestones I'm going to be working towards? And once those are defined, then breaking them down into tasks. These are those small things that I think Leslie was discussing, which is what are these small tasks that we want to make sure that we can do. What you want to do is make all of these things tangible. You also want to make them beautiful. You want to make them something that you don't mind looking at every day because you're going to have to, which is a problem with a lot of the bulky project management systems that we use in our enterprises, is because we don't want to look at it. It's not pretty. Short-circuiting our reward systems. Fred mentioned this addiction to the salary, and I agree. If you think about it, we are hardwired from almost day one to focus on short-term rewards. In school, it's about getting the best grade we can possibly get on an exam, and then getting the best grade we can on a course. And then we go into the real world, and we're getting a salary, we're getting a paycheck every 2 weeks, and a bonus at the end of the year. And this is what keeps us going. This is what keeps us engaged and keeps us working towards, on projects, et cetera, et cetera. When you decide to exit that and start up some sort of entrepreneurial enterprise to pursue a bold and creative project, those short-term rewards you've so relied on throughout your life are stripped away. You may not have anyone see what you're doing for a period of months. You may not be making revenues for years. So what do you do about this? And some of the people, real quickly, that I've come across have found ways of short-circuiting the reward systems in their creative teams. Whether it's Ji Lee, who spoke last year, who's in the audience from Google, who also has done a lot of very bold kind of creative projects on his side, on the side in his life. He uses games. Games of keeping people engaged. Games that just have these kind of incremental rewards that just kind of keep us engaged along this project plateau, where there may be no clear end in sight. And there are certainly many other ways that we can do this. But as leaders, what we must think about is that our teams need these short-term rewards. We are human, and these dictate the way that we work. And we can't just pretend that we can unplug from this need and pursue a bold creative project and actually survive this project plateau. Valuing the team's immune system is also really important. And I would just use the analogy of our body, which naturally fights off anything that is new. And we need to keep our immune system healthy. Now, of course, if you go in and get an operation for an organ transplant, the first thing they do is they suppress your immune system so you don't reject the new organ. And in brainstorming, you should do this. You should actually, the skeptics, the people that you work with that tend to shoot down ideas and find the faults, that's where those people should probably take a back seat and think about, or let everyone think about the possibilities. But what we need to do is actually empower the skeptics in the creative process in order to prevent those new ideas from constantly getting us distracted. This is something we need to keep in mind when we build partnerships. We need to value the role of the skeptics, the people, the Debbie Downers of the world. We typically don't want to work with these people, but they can often really help keep us on track and ultimately help us survive this long journey to fruition of an idea. Seeking competition is another thing that I found in a lot of these interviews, is people talking about, here's a quick story about the gentleman you're seeing on this slide multiple times. This is Noah Kalina, a Brooklyn-based photographer who had been taking a picture of himself every morning for 6 years. And this was a project that was ongoing for a long, long time, and he had no end in sight and no idea what this project would end up doing for anyone, yet alone his own career. And then one night, he's surfing and then checking out a blog, and he finds another photographer who is doing the exact same thing. She's been doing it for 3 years. And she's starting to think about, what am I going to do with all this? And he's like, oh shit, I got to do something. And so this quick moment made him decide within a period of about a week to make a YouTube video of these images over a 6-year basis. His girlfriend did a quick kind of like little piano ditty, and they put it up on YouTube. It ended up becoming one of the most viewed YouTube videos of all time. He became a very well-known photographer, documented on pretty much every major news show. This became a career turning point for him. Competition, seeking competition, something that we typically don't want to do, is actually something that's important, especially when it comes to staying engaged with very, very long-term and bold projects. Accountability. Accountability is also very important. We need to share our ideas liberally in order to get other people to hold us accountable to them. And all too often, we like to keep ideas a secret until they're fully baked and vetted and really ready to share with the world. In fact, a lot of the people that I met have this desire to share ideas constantly. And when I say to them, well, what if someone steals it? They say, hey, if it was that easy to reproduce and duplicate, it was a bad idea to begin with. But they recognize if no one else knows what they're working on, they're unlikely to remember as well. So creative process. This is a term that's thrown around quite often. What does it actually mean? I would propose that it is having an idea and simply trying to find a way to survive the project plateau. I think it's something that we all need to spend more time thinking about. The creative process, 1% of it is truly natural to those of us in the room, which is the creativity component. But then the 99% of this is an acquired discipline. This is something that the most remarkable creative leaders in the world who have made their ideas happen time and time again have spent the time to develop, is how to think about organization, leveraging their community, and how to lead teams to push their projects forward. So my plea to you is to focus more on the 99%. Thank you.